And I think Scott Turner is going to make a pretty good point on that and kind of take us to the next step.
Thank you, and I'm proud to have signed the pledge, by the way.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. My question is, I've had a lot of conversations with different legislators under the Gold Dome, and one of the arguments that I hear over and over again is you can't tie the gift that I receive from a lobbyist to any particular vote. So how would you answer that?
I think that's true. The column that's appearing tomorrow, Lawrence Lessig, who's a law professor at Harvard, has written a book called Republic Lost, in which he talks about the power of money in politics and how to fight it. And he talks about the fact that in Congress, and he's talking about Congress, but it fits in the state legislature as well. He says they operate under a gift economy. It's not a cash economy. It's not like, if you give me cash, I will do this for you, because that's illegal. Even in Georgia, that's illegal. But it's a gift economy.
Don't give them any ideas.
Well, they have the ideas already. It's a gift economy, which if I give you a gift, as Kyle was saying, if I give you a gift out of the goodness of my heart, and then a few days later I come to you and say, I got a problem, can you help me out? It's just human nature. It's a fact that the lobbyists are, in a funny way, they're taking advantage of a good trait in human beings. If somebody helped you out, you want to help them out. That's what they're doing. It's a gift economy. It's like, I'll give you that, and then a few days later, you'll give me this, and it's not a transaction. It's not a commercial transaction. It's not saying, I'll give you $25 for that or $50 for that. It's the human interaction, and Kyle's exactly right. They're building a relationship so that they can come back to it later. But you're right, it's not a quid pro quo, because that actually is in the law. It violates the law, and you can go, that is bribery, and you can go to prison. So they find ways just short of going to prison.
And what's really amazing to me is that oftentimes in these situations, and I remember one particular legislator after last year's session said, I received all these dinners, these sports tickets, and not a single lobbyist asked me to vote a certain way. Now, that I can actually believe, because this is about establishing relationships. And I always want to make the point that lobbying is not a bad thing, nor is every lobbyist bad. In fact, most aren't. But we think that when we dream up of the way lobbying should work in the perfect world, we hope somebody brings ideas from one side to a state senator, then somebody else brings issues to the other side, and the state senator decides based on what's best for his constituents out of those two arguments. Instead, with unlimited gifts, it's basically who's the highest bidder. How can we buy your vote with gifts as opposed to selling our ideas to you? So that's what kind of bothers me about the process.
Well, and there's a societal cost to the cynicism that comes about, even if everything is completely on the up and up. If all this happens, no one's ever asked for anything as a result. Legislators even sometimes vote against the wishes of the lobbyists who give them these things. There's a public perception, and here again, it's unavoidable, I think. It's human nature to look at that system and say, well, they're getting something in exchange for what they're doing. And that cynicism is corrosive for our society, and it undermines the underpinnings of our government.
Well, that kind of brings up a question somebody wanted to submit, was about term limits. Would they help diminish the party's ability to control elected officials, or either party's ability to control, or these lobbyists get? What about term limits? Any thoughts on that?
I get asked that question often. I'm sure Kyle does as well. My response is always, that's a terrible idea. It's a terrible idea because if you have term limits, and so the legislator who's been there for 8 years is the longest serving legislator. He or she has no idea why this particular law was passed, what it might do. There's no institutional memory. The only institutional memory that exists is within the lobbyists who have been there. There are lobbyists down there who have been there for 40 years. Every year you go back into this General Assembly, and there they are, a little bit older, so am I, but they're there, they're in the exact same place, doing the exact same thing. They know the Georgia code back and forward. They know all the issues very well. They're great sources of information. But if you don't have legislators who have been there for a long time too, and know when the lobbyist is selling them a load, you cede what you're trying to take power away from lobbyists. You're actually giving a great deal of power. Information is power. You're giving that to the lobbyist. Look at states like California, which has term limits. Perhaps the most dysfunctional legislature in the country, which says a lot. So it does not work.
No, I agree. I mean, it is appealing on one level, but what you do is you take away the ability of people to develop expertise over time and be able to rely on their own experience and own expertise instead of having to rely on what lobbyists or staff, which becomes another problem in a lot of places, and neither lobbyists nor staff are elected. The officials are, and so as appealing as it is in some ways, especially as it regards this question, it's not an answer.
And if you go down to General Assembly, a staff member older than 35 would be, Methuselah. They're all, young, sharp people. And Kyle's right. We have some very good legislators. We have people who know their issue, who are on their committee.
On both sides of the aisle.
On both sides of the aisle, who have been there, who really care, who know it. And you go to them with a problem, and they want to solve it. So those are the people that you would lose under term limits.
Another question from the audience is about what's basically called the revolving door, and it's saying, should ethics legislation include a time period when somebody leaving office, as the senator or representative you mentioned earlier, should there be a time period before they can become a lobbyist? Right now, under state law, there is a 1-year period. Our ethics proposal wanted to raise that to 2 and to also include staff, because a lot of times it's staff who make that quick change from state legislature employee to lobbyist. What are your thoughts on the revolving door and how that works?
I think it would be useful. I don't think it'd be a major reform. A year is a significant amount of time. That escalator, so to speak, that carousel is going to exist regardless. I think it's more of a problem for agency heads than it is for legislators, because they're the ones who really know the issues and can turn opinion around. And
at the federal level, it tends to be a bigger, probably a bigger issue, and I don't think there is a waiting period there. But they have larger staffs. There are more members of Congress. There are more lobbying firms. There's just more opportunity there. But anything that separates an elected official from an opportunity to cash in on their public service, I think is generally a good thing. But I agree. I don't know that it would be an enormous step forward for Georgia.
Yeah. Well, we're going to begin to wrap it up. One final question I got that we'll close out is a lot of the responsibility in tracking these legislative gifts and things like that come from that body that's our former Ethics Commission. The question was actually, why did we lose the Ethics Commission? Which it does feel like we have. But this is an agency that since 2008 has seen 42% of their budget slash. They've gone from a staff of 19 down to a staff about 10. Any thoughts on kind of the effectiveness or what needs to happen? Because it does seem like our Ethics Commission has disappeared.
Well, you saw during the week the tax package was passed that the reporting mechanism for this year for lobbyist gifts was down. There were technical problems, and even if you assume that everything is on the up and up, it's a problem when the only check against these things is transparency. And that's a direct result of underfunding for the Ethics Commission. And again, we're talking about I think maybe a couple of $100,000 in 1 year out of by the time you include bonds and everything and federal money, a $30+ billion budget. We're talking about a very small slice of the pie and something that needs to be done. But obviously it hasn't been done, and it hasn't been done for several years, and one can only believe or be led to believe that it's because the people who are in charge of the purse strings don't want that money being spent for that oversight.
The Georgia Ethics Commission is a beat dog. It's been beaten, it's been kicked, it's been whipped every time they try to stick their nose into where the legislators don't believe it should be. They cut their funding again, they cut their rulemaking authority, they rename it.
And in a great example of how the ball gets passed around, there was one chamber this year that wanted to restore the rulemaking authority and some of the funding, and there was another chamber that said it wanted to study ethics reform, and magically neither of those things came to pass. Rather than saying, well, I'll do yours if you'll do mine, they both decided they just wouldn't do either.
Well, let me say, just to close out, thank you both very much for this discussion. It's been extremely interesting, and I know I've learned a few things. Also, for our viewing audience, Common Cause Georgia needs a louder voice on these issues, and we'll hope you'll join with us by visiting our website or calling our office and becoming a member of Common Cause Georgia. We have our pledge board here today, and it was acknowledged that we've got very few signatures on it, so we need everyone's help out there to push candidates to sign this reform effort. I know we've actually got some candidates here tonight, and we invite you to sign it tonight. But we ask everybody out there to try to get their candidates to sign up on this pledge board.